Greetings, relatives. My name is Jim Bird. I'm a descendant of Chickasaw and Cherokee ancestors. Our original home was in northeastern Alabama. I've been a pipe carrier and a pipe maker for over 30 years. I make pipes exclusively for family and relatives around ceremonies. Pipe making is a very sacred act. I pray that our descendants who inherit these pipes will receive great blessings and strength from the prayers that have accrued in them. Perhaps someday in the far distant future, when they pray with these pipes, they'll think of us. I hope that this video will be of help to anybody who's trying to make a pipe these days. Thank you very much. Miigwech. While consulting with some relatives in Canada, the idea of doing an instructional video on pipe making was discussed. It was noted that the only pipe maker in their community had to stop because of age. It was agreed that it might be a good idea to do this to help develop new pipe makers. I have the greatest respect for the old-timers who crafted pipes with a flint knife and a stone drill. Today, a basic pipe might take me 12 to 15 hours of work. I can imagine that a pipe being made using all stone tools could have easily taken several hundred hours. My experience in crafting wood and stone is that there is no one way, but usually several ways that are better than others. The purpose of this video is not to show how it should be done, but offer some perspectives that may be of help. I'm going to record a complete process of making a basic pipe. I'm a finished carpenter, flint knapper, and I do beadwork and some quill work. I'm currently trying to recreate the method of making traditional wooden water drums the old way. I'm self-taught if there can be such a thing. It's just another way of saying trial and error. In all of these crafts, I've taken information from books, videos, and observing firsthand other workers and their work. It took some time, but by practicing these things, I've been able to discern what worked for me and what I had to abandon is not useful and in some cases actually misleading. My purpose in making this video is to make available some insights that may help someone in developing skill and technique in crafting stone pipes. Any pipe, no matter how crudely fashioned, if made with a good thought and prayed with, is holy and sacred. At the same time, anyone who starts to fashion a pipe hopes that the finished piece will come as close as possible to the original vision that they had in their mind's eye. In this video, I offer some thoughts and techniques based on my own experience. If something that follows here seems to resonate or help you, that would please me. Developing your skill working in stone is an organic procedure and should involve outside influence as well as experimenting with your own eyes and experience. My technique starts with sawing a rough blank from the stone. I drill the holes in the blank and then rough shape the whole pipe to a finished shape that is 1/16 inch strong on all facets or 1/8 inch overall. This is done with various files and leaves the rough shaped pipe with file marks. I then use sandpaper starting with 150 grit to remove the excess stone and remove all marks. One important thing for me is to have the tobacco hole and the stem hole be centered in the pipe. In the old days, pipes were drilled with tapered stone drills using a bow drill or a pump drill. If a tapered stone drill starts to drift off center, it can be easily corrected by tilting the drill as the hole expands and bringing it back to the center. If you try to do this with a modern steel drill, you run the risk of breakage. I have seen many finely shaped pipes where the holes were off center. This is a result of drilling the pipe after it has been shaped. Just break one finished pipe while drilling and you will probably come to the same conclusion. Drill the pipes in the rough shape and the holes will never be off center and the chance of breakage of a finished pipe while drilling is eliminated. I feel that doing this is one example of a technique I feel is imperative. The second thing is for the tobacco hole to line up the stem hole and for the pipe stem to be straight with the bowl when finished. This comes down to the manner of drilling. There can be various ways to achieve this. My technique involves carefully marking and drilling on a drill press and with a jig if necessary. Some folks may think of this as overcomplicated and unnecessary, but I have found that for me this yields the best result. A drill press is the only power tool I use. I only use carbide masonry bits. A little bit slower, but they won't grab, causing breakage or drilling deeper than desired. I use carbide hand files as well as standard files to shape in various grades of emery paper to finish. Carbide files for rough shaping work better, don't tend to clog up, and last throughout many pipes and pay for themselves if you're making more than one pipe. When it comes to final polishing, I use up to 1200 grit paper. I don't wet sand and usually get the same degree of finish as using 600 grit and a coating of beeswax. A little extra time at this point is well worth it. I just want to illustrate the several of the tools that I use in making these pipes. This is a hacksaw with a carbide blade. They're available at pretty much any hardware store, and if they'll far outlast any regular conventional hacksaw blade. Usually making one pipe will pretty much take the edge off any conventional hacksaw blade. I also use 3 different carbide rasps, two flat ones, a coarse and a finer one, and a half round. They come from Kutzall. I'll put a link in there a little later to that. Again, these are about $30 each, and they'll pay for themselves because same thing with a regular file, you know, the stone will take the edge off those things pretty quick. And I also use a couple of conventional files, a flat one and a half round and a finer cut for the fine finishing. These rougher ones are good for taking off a lot of stone, but when I get to the final shaping, I use these regular rasps, and then I have a little deburring tool that I use to soften the edges of the holes. I'm going to talk a little bit today about my method of marking the pipestone to set up drilling, and also how I use this little simple jig for the same purpose. This makes it easier for me to line the holes up perfectly, or as close to that as I can get, and also helps reduce breakage. So when I go to mark a piece of stone, now these particular ones have already been drilled, but if they weren't drilled when I'm first starting, what I do, the first thing I do is I determine where I'm going to place the outline for the tobacco bowl, and so then I use this template here to draw a circle there where the bowl is. Now in this particular case, because there's a little bit of cortex on this side, I've shaded it to this side so that I don't run into that when I'm doing the final shaping. Then after I get that hole drawn, I draw a center line down there, and then I use a square. I bring that line down perpendicular all the way down like that. Then I take that line and I turn it over, and I bring it over on the bottom side here, and I draw another line all the way up this way perpendicular for the line of the stem hole. Then I take that line across, and again use a smaller template to delineate the hole of the stem. And also I can do the same thing with a line here on the side, which will ultimately give me a guide as to where to shape the stem of the pipe to. Now in this particular case, these are all pretty, this piece of stone is pretty square in all directions, so once I go to drill it, I can either just hold it against the jig like this, or I can clamp it down using a clamp like that, and then drill it that way. Now on some stone, like this particular piece here, the base bottom of it is not square to the sides. So if I were to lay out the top of the bowl and bring it down perpendicular, it would be quite a bit off center. So I can use, in that case, if it's out of square, I can use the jig by placing the stone up against the jig. I can use the jig to draw the line down, and then when I go to drill it, in the same way, I can use that clamp to hold it so that the hole is perpendicular again, you know. Now, there's a piece of stone here. I centered the tobacco bowl, brought the line straight down, and then I brought it up this way. Now, because the face of this is slightly out of square, it brings the line quite a bit over this way. But since I have plenty of material left, I can just go ahead and do it like that. I can just drill this, draw the line, drill it, do the same everything else. But if I needed to, if I didn't have the room there and I needed to actually move this hole over, then I can use a shim in here in a clamp. I can clamp this with it like that so that it brings the line further over here and centers it on this piece of stone. Same way, if according to stone, sometimes you might need to shim it at the bottom like this to bring something in line. But either way, you can use the shims to line the thing up. And again, this is not the only way holes can be drilled. I know that if you're careful and you're take your time, you can do it freehand with a electric drill, and you know, using a piece of tape as a depth guide or something. But this is just my way of doing it, because it removes any chance of the holes not lining up or drilling too deep. That can happen. You know, you only have to do that once, and you decide there's a better way to do it, perhaps. Anyway, so if this system has any appeal to you, go ahead and use it. You know, otherwise, feel free to do it any way you want. This is an illustration of the drilling of the holes that I do in the stone, which I do in the rough shape, in the rough piece of stone before I do any shaping, because I believe that this makes it easier to keep everything lined up so that the holes are centered in the finished piece rather than drilling them later. And also it helps inhibit breakage and other problems. So I start by drilling this tobacco hole first, and I drill it to a predetermined depth about here. I drill these two holes here first before I drill this to avoid punching through here, punching this stone out into this hole here. So I drill these two first, and again to a determined depth here, about equal to where I want the finished top of the stem line to be. Then after that's done, then I drill a second hole with a 5/32 bit down through here. I call that the smoke hole, whatever. So it'll restrict a lot of the embers and stuff. I find this to be the best system. I've done several systems of connecting the tobacco hole and the stem hole here together. I think my feeling is on the really old pipes where they use tapered drills is that it was just a small hole where the two connected. But anyway, so after this is drilled, then I turn around and I drill this all the way through like that. So I believe that that's the best method that I've found for myself. But this can all be done later after the pipe is shaped if you feel so inclined. Fixing to drill the tobacco hole on this pipe. I always drill the tobacco hole first so that if it doesn't crush into the stem hole, and then I drill a little vent hole, and then drill the stem hole last. That way, I've got all the lines marked, plumb lines marked. This one, and I'm just clamping it against this jig for stability. If I can use shims if I need to bring any of these lines into plumb. This one is good enough just the way it is. So we're gonna clamp it up here and I've set the depth of the drill bit to the depth that I want to go to. We can talk about that a little bit later. Reset this just slightly. So I'm ready to drill what I call the little vent hole, which connects the tobacco hole to the stem hole. I've set the depth on this to go about halfway into the stem hole, and stem hole not being drilled, that will prevent it from crushing the top of that stem hole down, and then we'll drill the stem hole after that. Okay, I'm ready to drill the stem hole. I've got this stone clamped in here just for security right now. Make it more secure. I can do it actually by holding the jig by hand. I'm drilling this to a depth that's about 3/16 past the vent hole. It'll be down about here, and it should make contact with that vent hole if everything's lined up right. At this point, the channels on the masonry bit are extending below the surface of the drill, so I remove it back up repeatedly to clear out the dust so it doesn't build up heat. Okay, that should be it for the stem hole. Okay, my next step is to, what I usually do is remove excess stone with a hacksaw. You can file it all down completely with a file, but it's very time consuming. So what I've done here is I've laid out some lines where I'm going to take off the excess stone, and then I bring them down. I bring those lines down as a guide of where to cut with the saw and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece of stone that I have in the adjustable vise here, and I'm going to stop this here because it's time consuming and the noise is kind of grating. Here is the rough stone after I've sawed off a lot of the excess stone to make it easier to do the ultimate final shaping. I've reestablished the horizontal line here that lines up with the hole that was taken away when I sawed off the parts. Here is a similar pipe that I'm aiming for, very similar out of this piece of stone. What I'm looking for is a 1-inch diameter here at the base of the stem, down to 7/8 here, and 7/8 on the bowl where it joins out to about 1.25 inches out here with a flared curvilinear front. And So again, to reiterate here, what I'm looking to do next is to establish these lines here on the bottom and the top of the stem on a rough dimension. So as I want a 1 inch finished here, what I'm going to shoot for now is a 1 1/8 dimension here. And since I want to finish 7/8 here, I'm going to go for a rough 1 inch. Then when the whole pipe is shaped in the rough shape, then I can go back and do some fine filing and finish sanding to bring it down to that finished dimension. So as I'm filing this off, I'll use this center line guide here, and what I'll shoot for, since I want 1 1/8 here, is 9/16 from this line to there and here, and then 1/2 inch here, and from the center line to there 1/2 inch, so that I end up with a rough 1 inch. When I'm filing these top lines, I don't try to make it round. I just file it off, sort of a slight curve here and a slight curve here until I get the sides established, and then I'll round everything off. So when I'm filing these initial lines, I just have a slight curvilinear or slight curved line right here and right on the top there. Got to compete with the train here. So I'm fixing to start using the rough file here to bring this stuff into shape. So this line here is the 1 inch finished diameter I want. So I've got about an extra 1/16 right here. And so I don't need to take much off here if I'm continuously monitoring the shape here as I move along. So I've got about 9/16 or 5/8 here, so I need to take that down to about a 1/2 inch right here on this part, while adding or creating a slight curve here as I go across, not circular, but just a slight curve there. And the same thing on the bottom. There's more meat on the bottom, so I got to take off a fair amount here, and again here that dimension. So I'm start doing that now. I'm not going to continue the whole thing. Also, when I'm working like this, what I usually do with a vise is I just set it where I can I don't clamp the pipe in the vise, so I just set it where it'll support the pipe, and that way I can take it out back and forth out and readily check the dimensions and stuff. So I know that I have to take off more here at this place in the stem, so I'm just keep going back and forth like this. When I get closer to the finished shape, I'll actually turn it and file it flat like this. Start on the bottom here. Okay, I'm gonna stop the video here. I'll pick it back up when I get close to those finished dimensions, because this is repetitive and noisy. Okay, so I've finished those two first operations in terms of filing on the top of the stem and the bottom of the stem. So this is, I've achieved about 1 1/8 inch diameter right at this point, and about 1 inch there. So now I'm going to reestablish the line. I've reestablished the line on the bottom by bringing these lines forward there, and this line from the front round, and connecting that. So this is the center line as per this drawing up here, looking at it from the bottom. That's the center line on the bottom. And so what I'm going to do again is to shape a rough 1 1/8 inch on this side and about 1 inch here in a area that equates to where the stem meets the bowl. Now, if you're making a straight pipe, in a sense, where a T-pipe or an elbow pipe where the bowl is the same diameter as the stem is straight diameter and the bowl is a straight diameter, it's much simpler. That might even be something, if you're starting for the first time, to make it easy on yourself to do it that way, so that you can file over. When you're filing this part here, you have to be conscious of the fact that you can't come around here and up on with the file up onto this place. You have to keep the file below this line here. When you come around this way, you can't go up on that part there. You have to stop here. But now you can continue around as you shape the pipe from the middle of the bowl over like that. If I can illustrate it here, but when you're filing, when you're on this side, when you're coming around and you're trying to reduce this area thickness in here, as you come around here, you can't go past midway, because you're running up onto this, which is tapered. Now, if this part of the pipe is straight, it doesn't matter. Then you can come all the way up like that at the same time. But on this one, or on a pipe that's tapered, has a different shape, you have to come up like this and stay to this side, and you can continually do that. And as you get a rough shape, when you go to finish it, you can actually get a real sharp, clear line there that extends down. I don't know if you can see it here, but to a line here, it's like all one line. It delineates that angle. But anyway, so I'm going to start doing this here from both sides. And I'm going to start shaping the sides of the stem in here using this center line on the bottom as the guide. Now, this is fairly thick here. It's about 11/16 here, so I have to take off a fair amount of meat right here. And again, as I was explaining earlier, as I come around here, I don't want to go up here past that midpoint, but I can start bringing this over this way and starting to form that little valley in there. And I can start coming over here on this side of that, on an angle about a 45 from that mark right there. I can start bringing it over this way as I come around, but avoid coming up there. So I've got quite a bit of meat to take off here. I think I'm going to stop this video now and pick it up after I'm done and before the next step. Okay, so I've finished the rough shaping of the stem of the pipe. This in here, it's about 1/8 inch stronger than the finished thing, so I still have room. You can see here on the end I'm close. At this point, up to this point, I've used the lines to determine the thickness that I want, but from this point on, it's close enough that I actually disregard the lines and go to feeling. I can feel that there's a little ridge right here. Right here, it's round, but it develops kind of a little ridge in here. There's a little high spot in there. I go by feel from this point on to get the best, close as I can to round and smooth. And so what I'm going to do now is start on shaping the rough shaping of the bowl. And so at this point, I will use this line here, and I'm going to bring this into about, from the line to the outside, about 1/2 inch, so that the overall finished thing here will be rough one inch, and bring it down to 7/8 finished. And so I'm going to put that curve in here, which is visual, and then on the sides I'll use the thickness of the stem as the bottom dimension, just going by eye and shaping that curve in there. You can kind of see it a little better here, maybe, in that I'll set this shape here, this curve, and then on the sides I'll bring them up the same dimension as the stem right there. That'll come up there, and that'll be my determined. Then after I get those three set, I may do a little bit of work here to rough this out, real rough, but what I'll do is when I get the back curve and the two side curves, I'll use that as a guide for how to shape this one, and also I'll go into how to get this little projection there on the end. Oftentimes at this stage, when I'm shaping any part of the pipe that's flat, I'll run the file flat like this. That helps keep the line straight. When I'm early on, I'll use this method of filing, but once I get to the rough shape, then I do this. And I also have a little trick that I use to do the same thing when I'm sanding. I'll go into that a little later on the finished sanding part. But so I'm just going to start shaping getting some round in this thing here. This line here is real close, so I won't get up here near this until the final shaping, but I'll keep it down in the lower part here to start with. So this is going to be a time-consuming thing. So I'll close the video at this point and get back to you at the next stage. Okay, so here I've done the final shaping with the files and stuff on the pipe blank, and it's about 1/8 strong in most places, so I have a lot of room to kind of do the final smoothing and bringing it into roundness as much as possible. So for this for these next operations, I'll use a couple of little tools. I have a piece of molding which I got from a free sample at the lumber yards, and I cut it with a 45, and I use that as a sanding block in order to get into these to give me a flat thing where I can get into close to the angle there like that on one side, and then I turn it over and I do the same thing on the other side. Allows me to get tight into that little angle to sand it. And for flat parts, like on the bottom, I just use a straight, same molding, just cut straight, so I can go all the way across like that and shape it. On the curvilinear part of the bowl up here, I'm going to do all this final sanding in here freehand, because it won't matter that way doing it by hand. And I just use a piece of paper folded in half. I start with 150 grit, and this folded like that with a little edge allows me again to get into the tight corners. And I'm going to take this little deburring tool, and I'm going to round out the holes here on the top so that they're not prone to chip. And what I do on this little angled sanding block is I'll fold the sandpaper like that, and then I'll cut it to that angle on both ends. So that I have a angle sanding surface like that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do some sanding on that. I'm going to cut this video short because it's time consuming. this point I want to go through one sequence of sanding with the 320 grit paper. In this sequence I use the little sanding blocks, and I go all the way from 150 to 1200 grit paper. I know a lot of people stop at 600 and then use beeswax to get an additional buff look on the pipe, but I think myself, I'd rather go to much little finer grit. It doesn't take much time, and I just use the oil off my face to polish it. I don't generally like to use the beeswax because it tends to darken and collect in crevices and stuff, but that's a good way if you like to do it that way. Basically, if you've had any experience with woodworking or something, you know that as you move through finer grits of paper, all you're really doing is removing the scratches from the previous grits. So by the time I get through like the 180 grit paper, I'm no longer doing any shaping. I'm just basically polishing it. And I'll use these little sanding blocks up through 400 grit from 6. That's to prevent any dishing in the surfaces caused by hand sanding. But by the time I get to the 600 grit, it doesn't matter. I do it all by hand at that point. But I wanted to show you just the technique I use here with the little sanding blocks. So the first thing I do is take a little piece of paper like this, fold it in half, and I just use it to get into this crevice here, just to get right up next to that, polish out a little bit. Again, just removing any scratches or marks from the previous sanding. That's enough there. And then what I usually do is sand the ends of the top and the end of the pipe. There is a grain to this stone in a sense, but at this point, this fine of paper doesn't really matter. I'm going to ease the edges a little bit, just again to prevent chipping. If you have a hard edge there, it tends to more likely to chip. Smooth out the edge of the hole there a little bit. Now what I'm going to do next is use some paper here. I'm using the 320 to polish the bottom sides of the pipe. I can go over past where that little ridge there is, where it meets the bowl. You'll notice sometimes it'll leave a little scuff mark there. I'll get that out when I do the other side of it, when I do the bowl. That's why I always sand this type of pipe here, where there's this type of meeting between the bowl and the stem. I'll sand the stem part first, and then pick up any scratches that are in the bowl as a result of that. I'm going to use this angled sanding block to sand the stem here. It gets pretty close with this angle, but that first little bit of sanding I did in the joint there between the stem and the bowl gets it real good like that. It just gets close, but doesn't get it all the way in there. Again, I can come over there, even if it leaves a little scuff mark on the bowl. I'll take it out when I sand that part. Okay, I'm gonna cut this paper here and do the other side, the other angle. Okay, I'm going to take a little piece of folded paper and go into the joint here from the bowl side. Now, here again, all this sanding can be done, and even if it slightly alters the shape there, it's not going to alter it enough that it matters. I like this little vise here. It's got some hard rubber guards on the thing, and it's easily adjustable. And once I get to the 600 grit, I won't, because it does leave little scuff marks where you're rubbing around on there. So I'll sand it by holding it in my hand after, when I get to the 600 grit paper. Little delicate area in here. You have to I have to be careful not to sand off this little curved extension. So I just come right up to the edge of it as I'm sanding, and I'm getting out any little scuff marks where I came across on the other side. Now, what you can pay attention to here is if this valley lines up nicely like that all the way down. That's not absolutely critical, but if you want to keep it that way, if it starts to drift down here, that means you need to take off a little more. You can take off more on either way to kind of straighten that line back out. The same way here, if it starts to drift when you're shaping it, you can play with that by taking a little bit more off either one, whichever way is appropriate for moving that line a little bit. I'm getting about halfway up the bowl here with this sanding, so I'll turn it around in a minute and sand the top part. Again, just being careful not to go over that edge so it doesn't round it off too much. Okay, so that finishes that one course with the 320 grit paper. It's starting to be pretty smooth right now. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go through all the way. I take it all the way up to 1200, and I'll get back with you a little later. Okay, so here's the finished pipe after all the sanding and polishing. It's this is one of my favorite types of pipe. It's just simple, but some nice lines. And I kind of experimented with this one a little bit, so I did the final sanding. I went all the way up to 1500 grit. I went from 150 to 180, 220, 320, 400, 600, 1000, 1200, and 1500. It seems like a lot, but it doesn't really take all that much time after you get past 180 where you're actually doing shaping. But so initially I did all of that dry sanding, and then when I was done, I washed the pipe off and applied a little oil for my skin to give it an additional sheen. And as an experiment, then I went back after that and washed it off and resanded the 1500 wet sanded. So and again added a little oil for my skin, and I couldn't see any appreciable difference in the sheen. I think when you get up, if you're going from 1000 to 12 or 12 to 1500, I don't think that it makes much difference to wet sand, but you might find that different. That would be okay. I think if you're only going up to 600 grit, it's probably a pretty good idea to wet sand, because that extra little slurry that's created there will help polish it and stuff. And so anyway, this This here is the stem, and you can see that it lines up perfectly with the bowl in each direction. Now, a number of people have brought me pipes to try to clean up or do a little work on them, where the holes, either this hole or this one here, or both, were drilled considerably off center. And other ones, even when the holes were drilled on centered, a lot of times, after having worked years in carpentry and cabinet work and stuff, I have a pretty good eye for straight and plumb, but it's very hard to hand drill a hole this way as well as this way and have them both be straight at the same time. So even though you might not want to go to the trouble that I did of marking stuff like that, I think it's probably is to your advantage to try to find a drill press that you can use and clamp the stone in a way that you can hold it securely while you drill using a drill press. Now, in the old days, like I said, I think that when you use a tapered stone drill, you can continuously move the drill around so you can keep the hole centered and straight, but you can't do that with a twist drill. So anyway, so I think that's about it for now. I'm gonna maybe do another video, kind of wrap up some of the thoughts and stuff about this, but that's it for now.